Welcome back to Before Dieting. If you're joining us for the first time, first of all, thanks for joining. And I want to let you know that this is a podcast from the Waiting for Happiness project. I called it Before Dieting because my hope is that before starting another plan to change the way you eat, that you take some time to understand what your previous weight loss experience has been trying to show you. Let's face it, we all know the method for losing weight. And if you're not sure, there are 1,000 other podcasts that will tell you how to do it. The question I investigate here is why the weight keeps coming back, and in particular, what your eating, dieting, and weight history will reveal when you start looking at it differently. Most women who come to our project are looking for an explanation. They're familiar with all the ways to lose weight, but the repeated cycle of weight regain still doesn't make sense. And it's not because they don't understand food or that they haven't had some success. In fact, many of them have years of evidence that proves they can change their eating and they can lose weight. But it's after the weight loss that something always happens. And for some women, it feels like they wake up one day and the weight is back. And for others, they can see the accumulation happening, but they don't know how to stop it. But whichever one it is, they all have the same question. How did I end up back here again? And in trying to answer that question, most explanations begin by looking at the food. What did I change? What did I stop doing? Should I have used a different diet? The list goes on. And having answers to those questions can give you useful information for the next effort. But usually the most important information they need is not found in conducting a post-mortem of their last diet. And the simple reason for that is because knowing how to lose weight and understanding why weight returns requires two different lines of inquiry. And to make the case for this, I want to talk with you about what happened with Kate. Now, Kate is a woman in her early 50s, and she grew up in a household where some days were calm, but most days things were pretty volatile. Her mother's drinking meant the mood could change quickly and turn violent. So Kate, understandably, was always on high alert. She knew not to create problems or draw attention to herself. This was the family culture she lived inside, and for her, this was simply normal life. In fact, she told me she thought all families lived this way. Now, one of the byproducts of growing up in this environment was that Kate became super independent. She became very skilled at solving problems and figuring everything out for herself. But years later, Kate had a difficult problem she couldn't solve, and that was her weight. The confusing part was not losing weight. She knew how to do that and had done so many times. It was what happened afterwards that she couldn't figure out. Each time she lost weight and reached the place she thought she wanted to be, it didn't feel like she thought it would. In fact, it didn't feel good at all. Instead of feeling good, she felt frightened and exposed. And when she felt like that, the old eating patterns returned, and quite quickly so did the lost weight. But like many women, Kate explained it in the only way she knew how, that she had failed at dieting again because of a sweet tooth and a lack of willpower. And this is where changing the angle of our questions becomes so important. In systems thinking, we ask different questions. Instead of asking, why wouldn't Kate keep doing what was working, we ask, what changes for Kate when her weight disappears? Because her weight history was showing us a pattern. It showed that weight loss was not her problem. It was the point after weight loss where the pattern changed. So that was the place to investigate. When Kate looked into her weight history, the weight loss and regain pattern was clear. She also knew that being a small size did not create the feeling she was expecting. She thought weight loss would bring more confidence, less anxiety, and maybe even freedom. When she thought about it at the deepest level, what she really wanted was to finally relax in her own body. But something unexpected kept appearing. Each time Kate reached a lower weight, she began to feel exposed. Even though people complimented her weight loss, being more visible left her feeling vulnerable and unprotected. And as those feelings increased, she found herself returning to familiar eating patterns, and of course the weight slowly came back. So eating wasn't the first thing that needed explaining. What was creating the pattern was. And Kate, like all of us, needed to extend the boundary of investigation beyond food. And once she did that, her eating and weight gain started to make sense. One of the things that became visible as Kate worked through her weight and dieting history was how far back her story went. Not that childhood explains everything, but because our early experiences often create ways of responding to the world that continue long after the circumstances have changed. Looking back through her experiences, Kate could see that being noticed had not always felt safe. Growing up in a home where violence could happen without warning, staying small and avoiding attention had made perfect sense. It was a survival strategy. But those responses belonged to an earlier environment, yet she could see now that those instructions had travelled with her into adult life. So coming back to asking more useful questions, the question should never be, why would I want to regain weight? She didn't want to regain weight. Most women don't. The better question became, for Kate, what familiar place was the weight returning me to? And once she asked that question, the investigation moved in a completely different direction. I think there's another piece of Kate's story that's worth mentioning here, and that is when she was young, her father would regularly share sweet treats with her when they were away from the family home and her mother. He even called them their secret treats, something that was just between them. At the same time Kate was eating these secret treats with her father, secrecy was also a part of the wider family environment because of her mother's drinking. So without intending it, secrecy and food became connected. Food was not only food, particularly sweet treats were loaded with meaning. As an adult with her own family, Kate often ate junk food in secret at night after the family had gone to bed, and for years she labelled this as a bad habit she needed to stop. But when she investigated this background of hers, she saw something completely different. So coming back to our changing of questions, the important question wasn't, why are you eating in secret, which is accusatory and shaming? The more inquisitive question became, what does eating in secret do for me or give me? And for Kate, she knew the answer to that immediately. It created a space where she didn't have to be on guard, a time she could relax and not have to worry about her mother's violence. It was also a place where she could reconnect with a father who provided the only safety in a volatile household. The eating made much more sense once she understood the role it was playing. And that's why in the Waiting for Happiness project, we look beyond the food itself, because eating is not one behaviour with one explanation. Sometimes it is about hunger, sometimes about enjoyment. But for Kate, it was the antidote to an unstable, unpredictable home life where violence was a reality. The work is in understanding which one is operating for you. Kate's story changed because she stopped looking only at calories and weight and started uncovering what lay underneath it. Her repeated weight regain was not random, there was a structure. And without being too simplistic, the repeating cycle for Kate sounds like every time she lost weight, she lost a protection. And when she lost a protection, the old ways of eating responded. The weight returned, of course, restoring her protection. Once Kate could see the pattern, she finally knew where change needed to begin. And it wasn't with another diet or more willpower, but by going further in understanding the part of the cycle she'd never been shown how to investigate. That is why, if you've been stuck on the dieting roller coaster, knowing your weight history matters. When you map the diets you've started and stopped, and what happens afterwards, they stop being just memories of failure. They become information, data, something you can work with. Because once you can identify the correct problem, then of course you can actually work on solving that. Now, your experiences, patterns and reasons will be different to Kate's, but what is the same is that your weight history is not proof that you failed. It's evidence waiting to be included. So if you're ready to hear your own weight story, start with our weight and dieting history diagnostic. It has the pathway, the questions and guidance to get you through it. I'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Before Dieting, and I'll talk with you next week.